Thanks, Carton. We've moved quite seamlessly from platform, e-com growth, marketplaces, operational issues. We've woven in a few three-legged dogs, and on that note, we'll move into logistics and supply chain. So let me welcome, please, Edward Donald, Darko Atijas, Maurice Metz, Rijk van Meekeren, and Claire Muir. Is that what you like? Guys, without running through your entire CV, maybe just give the audience who have waited around very patiently for the last but not least panel. So just give us a quick overview of your CVs, and then we'll dive into a few questions.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I started off in fashion retail, but for the last 10 years I've been in supply chain looking after multi-channel and e-commerce fashion and beauty retailers.
Darko, Atijas. 10 years ago, I started with assisting hospitals and healthcare to produce better software products to deal with some consumer issues. I invested in Temando about 7 years ago, while the company was growing for the last 7 years in London. Prior to joining Temando full-time, I had my own document consultancy dealing with paper reduction in a large enterprise.
My name is Rijk van Meekeren. I'm the founder and CEO of B2C Europe. Our company's focus 100% on cross-border e-commerce in Europe. We provide local distribution, local return services, local fulfillment services, and local customer services in all major countries of Europe. And we have warehouses and staff all over Europe.
All right, my name is Maurice Metz. I work at Docdata. For the who don't know the company, we work for some large e-tailers like ASOS, Zalando, Bol.com, where we run large-scale fulfillment operations in Europe. Personally, I'm responsible for for designing and implementing the drop shipment capabilities for brands like Philips, Unilever, and that's why we are setting this table today.
Okay, thanks, guys. Just before we dive into some key questions, those clever people over at OC&C this week released some quite interesting stats around what we're going to discuss, and I think we'll probably touch on two aspects really. So trucks and sheds, which Claire, I know that's probably your area, but also final mile and getting product to customers. Now, just in terms of some stats, so online purchases over the last 10 years, excluding food, have doubled in value. They're predicted to double in value again in the coming 10 years, but the actual growth of the overall retail sector is only going to forecast to grow by 2.2%. So eating massive market share into the existing size of the retail market. And Anita over at OC&C was also quoted this week as saying that 6 in 10 shoppers abandon baskets online because of issues relating to the last mile. So just sort of taking in consideration that kind of last mile factor, we might be jumping into maybe the biggest question of the lot. So let's get that out of the way first of all. So where does the final mile component of supply chain go now? You've got sort of breakthrough ideas, drone deliveries, but they're not delivering hundreds of thousands of parcels anytime soon. You've got self-driving cars, they're crashing into each other. So where does this sort of final mile aspect of delivery go to next in order to unblock that bottleneck? Maybe Darko, could we give that to you first?
Perfect. Topic very close to our hearts. We were at the Post and Parcel event earlier in the week, so a big conference in Lisbon. The operators themselves are actually asking the question about what they need to invest into. So a lot of these ideas that are coming up around the fringes to address consumer demand primarily. So obviously drone deliveries being one. We personally think that's going to be choked by regulation for time to come. Who knows? Maybe carrier pigeons are going to be invented. Anyway, there's always going to be alternative delivery mechanisms. What we wanted to do is distinguish between real consumer demand, what they actually want versus what might be driven by marketing. So we actually went out and did our own research. There's probably two pieces to this. The first one being the front end and the shopping cart experience to avoid abandonment issues. So what are consumers actually expecting? So if we talk about the UK market specifically, there's certainly, obviously, standard and express, no word of a doubt. Areas that we think are worthwhile investing into from an operator perspective are certainly same day and time slot delivery services. Now, the big gap there, of course, is making these available as services in the front end, in the actual shopping cart to consumers. It doesn't rely on actually printing a label anymore. This is more to do with actually making these options available accurately to the consumer in the front end. The second issue is with repurchasing. So it's actually a much simpler issue to solve, is setting and managing expectations. So even if a retailer wasn't to invest into providing same-day or time slot infrastructure, the simplest thing they can do is provide accurate tracking feeds. It's really as simple as that. The data's out there. All you need to do is aggregate it and put it into an accessible format to the consumer.
Maurice, maybe something to add?
Yeah, I think there's also quite an opportunity here for both brands and retailers to cooperate together. Just to give you a simple example, we have with a brand called Shimano for the bike gear. We are integrating stock feeds which are actually from the local cyclist dealers into our platforms as well. So you can also give the opportunity for consumers to pick up the specific part of local shops as well, which actually gets the stock a lot more closer to the end consumer as well. Sure, from a fulfillment perspective, there are a lot of things which are happening there too. Depends a bit on the market. Holland, a small market, dense infrastructure. What you can see there is that retailers have been pushing it quite a bit, to extend the cutoff times. Essentially, you have next day delivery, meaning that up to 12 o'clock in the evening, you get it delivered tomorrow. Same day is happening as well. And actually, from an operational point of view, it's quite an interesting development there too, because it will offload the peak we have at the evening of the normal in the evening operation by triggering the consumers to place their orders in the morning as well, so they can have it delivered in the evening as well. So from an operational part, these kind of developments are actually not too bad because we can spread workload there as well throughout the day. So yeah, various options there, which makes it interesting.
Maybe Claire, I think just on the same topic, I think one of the things around this issue, it's actually all about customer expectation management, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's the sort of I want something now generation, if that's the right word. And I think Steve touched on it earlier on in terms of delivering stuff either same day or definitely next day.
Yeah.
How are you responding to that from a trucks and sheds perspective?
Well, we're obviously buyers of carriage, so we're shared user sheds for the most part. So we're going to the market and getting those services for our clients. There is a lot of scope for these kind of the time deliveries and for same day, and I think that the consumer is demanding a lot of choice and convenience. But I personally believe fundamentally the consumer is most interested in price. So you need all of these things. You need to give the consumer choice, but they won't have the big volume take up. There'll be sort of optional extras which are nice to have. There's some business models which really need them, but fundamentally the consumer really wants to know exactly when the delivery is going to be. It doesn't have to be that fast. It needs to come when she's expecting it, and it's really, really price driven.
And so maybe Ed, I know you're the coalface more to the point from a brand and retailer perspective and working with them about how to help them internationalise. How are they responding to the customers' pressure or the customer pressure that's being put on the brands?
So I think it probably divides down into two areas. At UK Trade and Investment, we have a global view of the different delivery options and that type of thing that brands can invest in when they go overseas. And some take a much more data-led approach to going overseas, and they may perhaps use an e-marketplace such as Chow was talking about earlier on, and with that begin to derive the learnings from understanding consumer behaviours and building a data set. Other companies are perhaps less familiar with how the expectations are so varied across the globe, and perhaps make the error of using a similar model or approach that they have maybe in this country or overseas in Europe, and then miss the opportunity when they go into Asia, where things are just so much on fast forward at the moment.
And I think that moves then very quickly into the next question about returns. certainly brands and retailers, always either the first or the second question, how do we manage returns? Rick, is that anything that you can sort of enlight on? How can returns be managed and best met to, I guess, best serve the customer, but also best serve the brand? Because retailers don't want return goods flying back and forth between continent or country or wherever.
Returns is a major reason for consumers to step out of the checkout. If they see the returns procedure is not easy, or it's too much hassle and it costs a fortune to return an item, especially cross-border. Some sites ask a fortune, or they have an international return address. If you offer that, you know for sure that consumers will be disappointed when they buy something for you, and especially when they have it already and they want to return it, and it is a lot of work to return it. Then probably you will not have any repeat orders anymore from that consumer. So returns I think is becoming a major selling point for retailers, and they should be aware of the importance of that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the brands that we talk to, and conversely also the platforms that we're talking to, certainly those in China, and Chow, you might be able to, if you're still here, add some comment to this. The platforms are readily saying to us, actually, we don't want fashion or apparel or footwear because the returns are so high. Just the economies of scale on that don't add up, and so what we want are items that really aren't returned. And someone mentioned baby milk powder. No one's returning baby milk powder anytime soon. So they're actively moving towards categories where they can diminish returns and just sort of fast forward the process of more and more transactions. Just sort of stepping into some more stats from our friends at OC&C. So one of the key growth areas is certainly in terms of managed consumer expectations of click and collect. So click and collect cost retailers 4 times the amount that it would to get someone to come into store and buy from in store. And then home delivery is between 5 and 23 times the cost of getting a customer to come in store. So I think that leads to an issue around localization. So how do I get goods closer to the customer so that they can either go to a shop that's convenient to them, or we talked about Doddle was discussed earlier on, so it's a localized drop-off center. How does localization then drive, or how is localization driven into the sort of consumer final mile? And anyone for that? First of all, whoever wants to put their hand up.
Now, our whole company is built on local services, so I started this company in the year 2000, actually, at the moment that, let's say, e-commerce started a little bit becoming more mature, or actually I think the e-commerce started late 90s, so it was in the beginning of e-commerce. And you saw immediately that consumers, they want to buy clothes at home, they feel comfortable, they have the trust when you feel like home. It has to do with any kind of the purchase. It has to do with the translation. When we talked about Alibaba, everything has to be translated in your language, else you do not feel comfortable. It has to do with payments. It has to do with the delivery. It has to do with the returns. It has to do with the customer service. If people do not feel at home, they probably don't buy from your site. So I think it's crucial in online sales. Talking about fulfillment, I don't think that fulfillment necessarily has to be local, because you can, now what we have heard this whole day about marketplace, you can conquer the world through a marketplace from one central warehouse in the world. I think that's possible. But the other aspects, I think it's crucial.
But you still got to get, obviously, the final mile, the goods into the customer's hand.
Exactly, that should be a local solution, but you can ship it from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I think if I could just perhaps build on that, that's the exciting thing for British companies who can now export in transactional goods, is that perhaps where the role of the distributor dealt with selling into a retailer and returns, it's now possible to change the kind of distributor you might look to work with, or bypass having a distributor, because you've got so many services at a local level that can underpin how your brand's delivered in the market. So I would think that hopefully for British brands who are looking to export, and after all the demand is there, that it's also very encouraging to hear and see this spectrum of supplier services that you can use to model different market entries.
Do you feel almost that you're challenging then the traditional route to market. So if you've got a franchise partner in, let's say, China, the country we're focusing on a little bit, that you could ask your local franchise partner to fulfill goods for your own managed e-commerce solution. Is that something you see coming?
Yeah, I think that it will pose some challenges in the case where there's a legacy business, for example, and maybe the P&L has been built on very traditional, inverted commas, basis. But I think it's the nature of now running those franchise agreements that you need to go into them with an eye on flexibility and different solutions being provided by the partner, certainly.
And Claire, sorry, go on.
No, what I would like to add to that is it also gives the brand the opportunity to also start selling their full assortment towards the end consumer, or also via drop shipment methods, via third-party retailers as well, when they have this capability in-house. In a sense that, normally speaking, a retailer would only buy just a fraction of the assortment of a brand. The fast movers, obviously, since it would be too costly, to buy the full long tail there as well. And whenever brands are able to offer similar type, has the same level of services as the retailers are able to, then the retailer is also willing, to integrate the full assortment of the brand into the systems. Of course, the topic we touched upon earlier today with the integrators. So that's definitely an opportunity there.
Claire, I was just going to touch maybe from a sort of warehousing perspective then. Do you see the possibility of maybe outsourced e-com warehouses in countries where there's already bricks and mortar logistics facilities, then sitting side by side from an e-com perspective?
I think there's potential, and probably every combination of things will happen, depending on what the proposition is. There is obviously a lot of blurring lines between what is a store, what is a PUDO, what is a warehouse. And also you've got this whole omni-channel or multi-channel.
Everyone know what PUDO is, sorry?
Pick up or drop off. So it's Doddle is a PUDO, for example, but all those Amazon boxes, that sort of thing. Sorry. So yeah, I think possibly you won't really have necessarily separate e-commerce fulfillment centres where there's already a warehouse fulfilling bricks and mortar, because it's click and collect. Is that a brick and mortar order or is that an e-commerce order? There's not a clear distinction between the two, and multi-channel needs them to be together, but the blurring will come more into the store, into these PUDO places, I think.
Right, okay, so stores almost then become a localised fulfilment option for
some brands, definitely. For some brands it's not right, but yeah, you get shop assistants becoming warehouse pickers in the store, and you've got obviously delivery drivers becoming the face of the brand as well. So,
okay, so almost possibly
it's all getting very fuzzy.
Possibly the reverse effect.
Very much so.
So a decreased requirement on logistics as a central hub, and actually just a fragmented logistics offer.
Almost like the fulfilment centre becomes more of a hub and spoke, like a carrier traditionally, maybe.
I think shops are not fulfillment centers. So when this, we all say that e-commerce is growing fast. So the risk is that your shop is becoming a fulfillment center, like it's a PUDO network. I just had a talk with Maurice about that. When your whole store is filled with packages and etc., I think this space is a little bit too expensive to do fulfillment.
That is definitely a problem. But I think because retailers are finding carriage so expensive, a lot of propositions are making space to have an area in the shop for exactly that. But it wouldn't be suitable for Burberry. And of course, you do want to your rate of sale per square foot. Obviously, you need to be having a regular shop. So that's what I'm saying. It's right for some, so there's space for both, but the boundaries are blurring, I think, between the two.
I think it's not sustainable, because when the volumes really go up, then you have a problem.
Yeah. Well, Rijk, we don't agree on this topic, but we already figured that out. But don't forget the cross and upsell opportunity you have when you combine both. And here in the UK, John Lewis is the perfect example of that. And also just touch upon the point of being able to fulfill both your retailers and direct to consumers from one operation. You see that typically now retailers tend to have a shallower depth of stock in their own stores. So replenishment has to become more often. They have to do it a lot often. And therefore the characteristics of retail replenishment are actually coming more closer to what it is about to fulfill a consumer order. So it also makes sense at a certain point to put both the processes together again, because we are not putting, pushing all the stocks we have in our central DCs towards the retailers anymore. It's more a pull effect by replenishment. And that, from a process point of view, looks a lot more similar to end consumer orders than what happened before.
And surely, therefore, it's all coming back to customer expectation and managing those expectations. So if you've got localized inventory, admittedly maybe not all your inventory, but you've got some in store that can fulfill maybe 90% of your orders, then you've got foot traffic coming in the stores. And there's a stat around the Argos eBay tie-up, I think, that there's a 40% uptick in average order value, if that's the right thing, the average basket value possibly in Argos of those eBay customers coming in to collect their orders. So it does work to drag people back into the store.
And for exporters, that's very, very encouraging, because what would otherwise potentially get stock once it's gone overseas, if the company and the culture offers the team leader the flexibility to begin to experiment in this way, it can actually be a lot better, albeit at a slightly discounted price perhaps, than seeing that goods sitting warehouse side and as a write-off. So I think, I suppose what would be good is to see a sort of spirit of experimentation coming through, really.
Yeah.
Try and get FD to sign that off. That would be an interesting one. I guess it also answers the question of the fact that no retailer wants inventory just sat out arbitrarily in warehouses all around the world on trying to answer the question of localized fulfillment. And it's much better to then use a sort of hub and spoke.
At least to start with. I mean, obviously, once you've tested it, and
yeah, of course,
you have to be able to evolve.
Yeah, it's scalable. Yeah.
What's actually quite interesting there is that how you touched upon returns in the beginning. What you typically see with returns is that is actually the assortment which is moving the fastest. So meaning people order a lot. And what we do, if you have a localized returns network as well, what we have seen is that if you keep the stock for a certain amount of the time locally as well, you actually have quite a high chance that you can also sell it locally again. So by having this network of returns hubs there, you can actually provide a better service towards the end consumer as well, and also lowering your cost because you can make use of the local courier networks as well. So that's actually for testing the waters in a certain market, returns are actually quite interesting. Since it also also from a taste perspective, in France people buy other types of clothing than in Germany or here in the UK. So, having your stock initially central, which is fine, but to identify the trends in where your stock is actually selling the most, you can actually do via returns and make use of these local networks as well.
And I guess by keeping it locally, you keep the inherent value in the goods in that country, because by the time you actually sent it back to its home market, you've lost the value of the goods that you're trying to return anyway.
Yeah.
So just taking a step on, an issue of who's paying for this. So customers generally want everything for free, right? They want it tomorrow and they want it for free. The retailers are thinking, well, hang on a minute, I'm going the extra mile here to get the goods to you as quick as you want it, so you've got to pay for it. So there's a bit of a growing disconnect between who's actually responsible to pay for this additional infrastructure to get the goods to the customer. Once again, coming back, we ought to invite them really. We're coming back to the OC&C. So there's some research they recently released said there's a sort of a £4 cut-off. So the maximum that customers are willing to pay for almost next day or same day 24-hour delivery is about £4. Anything over that you'll start seeing increased cart abandonment. Anything under that, obviously, great. But where does this disharmony go? And I know it's a bit of an open-ended question, but the retailers obviously want the customers to pay for it. Customers aren't willing to pay for it. Where's this sort of grey area going to move next? Darko, you look like you're
real live example. So one of our customers, the Iconic, so part of the Rocket Group, they're trying to grapple with this very issue. So same-day delivery. So we're talking about a Friday offer for a ladies' outfit, for example. So providing it was ordered prior to 1 p.m., they've got it at work by 5 p.m. Fully laden charge to the customer. So I think the local charge is about $4.95. Customers happily pay, and the rest of the charge is actually buried in the cost of the good. And the way that retailer addresses that is, incidentally, using our technology in order to push that cost upstream. So now what we're doing is essentially providing this sort of front-end piece, not just to the retailers, but also to the postal authorities and the carriers. Again, referencing it earlier in the week, where they're saying, right, so we want to invest in additional infrastructure, but we're already operating on thin margins. So how do we meet consumer expectations? And of course, someone has to pay. There is no such thing as free delivery. So I guess the potential solution to this is making it a little bit more opaque from a customer's perspective. There are options out there that you can actually push that cost up without the consumer actually realizing, but providing them with the service that they actually want.
I think you don't even necessarily have to do it without the consumer realising. I think generally they're often prepared to pay for an enhanced service. You know, the basic service, the slower one, yes, that probably should be free in most cases. But any kind of a delivery window or in the same day, that can all, I think you can upfront charge for it.
100%. All I'm saying is that if there are sensitive people in retailers, e-commerce departments, they can obviously manage that themselves how they want to. Yeah, exactly.
I think we should stop giving away all these logistic services.
Couldn't agree more.
You don't give away your product, so why give away logistics? It's not good. There's a lot of value in the delivery, what I said, also in the return. So ask a fair price for that. And there's what you also say, there are different scales of services. So let the consumer understand that what he's paying for. So if you ask someone, you have a Volkswagen, an Audi or a Porsche, and you give it all for free, you don't have a value to it. So you give different services, different qualities, you ask a price for that, and then you really understand what the consumer wants. Of course, they all want same-day delivery if you give it away for free. If you ask a fair price for it, probably nobody wants it. So that is, I think that's the whole industry has to move in that direction.
I've actually got two real-life examples from poor delivery experience in my own life. So we ordered a barbecue. It arrived yesterday at 11 a.m. and the delivery driver refused to help my wife to actually drag it into the house. This is an 80 kilo parcel. Fortunately, she's quite attractive and actually managed to convince him somehow. I'm not sure how, but she did. Point is, that specific example, we were willing to pay an extra £10 to simply have this driver bring that parcel into the house. But they don't do it because of OH&S and all kinds of other reasons. So just the ability for a consumer to pay for that additional white glove service, more than happy to do it. Second example, again, my wife being the guinea pig here. She's got a home staging business. For those of you who don't know, that's basically providing furniture to wealthy property owners and portfolio owners to dress up properties. They've bought £60,000 worth of furniture in the last 6 months alone. Every single one of those orders was made online. Every single one arrived with a huge amount of packaging and was literally just dropped off at the door. It's impossible for two ladies to carry a couch up 4 staircases. And the amount of waste that leaves is just inordinate. Again, another example of a white glove service where a consumer or a business would be more than happy to pay a premium. But the issue is the pricing model and pushing that up into the cart again. So providing you can get over that barrier, I think we're in a happy place.
Nice to see we're falling into stereotypes. We've got logistics guys saying we ought to pay for logistics services and Aussies ordering barbecues. Martin, I think you're still hiding around the corner, aren't they? So I've got a stat that you may or may not agree with. So in terms of Amazon Prime, 8 out of 10 subscribers say they purchase more frequently from Amazon as a result of being an Amazon Prime member, which I also think ties quite nicely back into this whole sort of paid-for delivery service. Do you see a future, Amazon clearly do, in these sort of expedited delivery shopping clubs, for want of a better word?
Yeah, shall I go first?
Yeah.
So I suppose from the point of view of people visiting the United Kingdom and buying from retailers, and now with the Schengen Agreement notably making it easier for, sorry, not Schengen Agreement, but the government making it easier for visitors to come from China, we've seen a tremendous increase in the desire for people to shop here, have it packed and delivered to a home destination. And I know Royal Mail offer that sort of service, but I'm aware of other conversations with the hotel groups where they're really looking to expand that, so I'd say definitely.
Anyone else?
Well, the Prime service is, of course, a great example how to commit consumers to buy from your store. Obviously, by giving away, indeed, a premium service, the fact that people paid something for it, they will make a second thought about it whether they would buy it at other store because they already paid for something with Amazon. So it's with the barrier curve in Holland is doing the same thing. So you can buy for it's like 20 euros or something per year. You can buy off the delivery charge, and it works perfectly. So they really get a lot more traffic and indeed more turnover from that. And you know, but then it also becomes worth it to pay for the delivery from your margin you make from that. So it's, I think from a marketing point of view, the Prime service is a great concept.
Okay, one more question before we jump to the audience. So I was having a similar conversation, and Ed, I'm glad you brought up Royal Mail. I was having a similar conversation with them last year, and what went out to them and a few others that were in the room in the sort of fulfillment space was what one key thing would you be able to change if you were given the opportunity to? And Royal Mail said to me that they'd standardise letterbox sizes because that would allow them to deliver a whole load more products and drop them through the door. So anyone got a silver bullet in terms of what you would be, the one thing you'd be able to change in terms of being able to make this whole customer expectation management, next day delivery for free, but someone's paying for it solution?
I think for the long term is, we haven't talked about the environment, but I think on the long term it cannot be sustainable that we have so many drivers coming to your home. That is, I think, congestion will be tremendous. And I think the industry should find a solution to combine these deliveries to someone's door. I think for the long term that is a challenge probably for the communities, for the cities, for the government to solve that problem.
It's an interesting one because the carriers have been being asked that question for a number of years. Will you please, or do you see yourselves cooperating? And I think lots of people recognise the need for it, but the carriers haven't. They're not able to kind of let go of their competitive barriers just yet. But I think you're right. I think that will happen.
There's probably different ways of tackling the issue. And I mean, a classic example of a postal authority trying a top-down approach. You know, everyone's going to invest in a large letterbox. It's just not feasible. You have to go a bottom-up approach. So obviously, looking at it from a technology prism, it's about providing the industry with the tools in order to be able to accurately represent to consumers in an existing e-commerce infrastructure, so in an existing shopping cart environment, what those delivery options are. So pre-certified technology that can actually push those delivery options directly from a consumer-facing perspective. That's kind of the first way to tackle it. Second way is, and this is something we discussed earlier in the week, is better industry collaboration. So yes, they're all sort of putting up walls, but increasingly, you know, I think carriers are realizing that they need to collaborate. They need to diversify their service offering, and you know, investing in capital isn't necessarily the only way to do it. They're also looking at technology and, you know, Uberifying their fleets. You know, putting out courier networks using very light SaaS infrastructure. They're looking at injecting volume into parcel lockers, and the other interesting one is out of the warehouse, where, for example, you know, if you talk about peak periods, 24 versus 48-hour services, they're looking at technology as a way to actually choke 24-hour services into the retailer's environment once it reaches a certain critical point that they simply cannot meet service. So what that means is where, you know, at 9 a.m. in the morning that day, there may have been two options in that consumer shopping cart for both service levels. Once they cross that critical threshold, there would only be one 48-hour option, for example.
Okay, thanks. Any questions?
I think
we've got one over the back.
Oh, sorry.
No. Yeah, after you.
I think that Jet.com in the US is offering consumers lower pricing if they waive the right to return. And I was just wondering whether you think that may become an ongoing feature of e-commerce from a wider point of view.
I think that's a very good direction. At least it's combining a price and a service, and making the relationship between making people aware that it costs something. That is, I think that's very important. Consumers have to be aware it costs something to return it, and if that company is offering a combination like that, I enthusiastic about that.
It's an interesting idea, and I'm not sure how it would play legally with the actual statutory rights that happen over here. But I can see some product categories where that would be a tremendous idea. It's quite risky in the area which I know best, which is fashion, because even if they did waive their right, then they could be saddled with something they didn't like, which could be a very negative shopping experience and push into not getting the repeat sales. But yeah, very interesting.
What is it, 14 days from point of receipt, I think, is
It's
it?
gone up to 30 now.
Is it? Okay.
So it was 7 originally in the UK, but 14 a couple of years ago.
And 90 in Germany, I think, is it?
No,
it's the same.
Formally,
No,
it's also
the
14
same.
days.
So
It depends a bit on the
been
retailer, what they want to
harmonised.
offer.
But you don't actually have to return it in that time. You just have to notify that you're going to.
Right, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think indeed it will work for certain product categories. You know, if you have been looking for that specific Sony camera, you know, if you can get a little discount on it. You also see this with these kind of outlet shops, right? It's that quite a lot of our customers, when they actually receive returned items, they put it on a marketplace, eBay, these kind of things, and then also consumers, they are willing to pay. They are paying a bit less for it, but then they also waive some rights there as well. So it's definitely an option which could work out properly there. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. In fashion, it will likely be not a model which can work. But electronics, toys, all kind of things where you can where you are pretty sure the thing will work, then of course it could do quite well.
Question at the back.
One of the things that has been touched on is theft. For example, my wife has a makeup business. She also sells online. Amazon, the recipients claim about less than 1% is actually not delivered, and I suspect that could well be raw mail. With eBay, it's closer to 5%, and people claiming it's not being delivered. And even where you've got signed for, so even where you've got actual people delivering in trucks, your own logistics service, people can still claim they haven't received it. How do you deal with those situations, other than just write it off?
I think with our clients, there is an element of self-insurance, especially at the more value end and at the high volume end. It is, again, in my experience, possibly only, it is less than, it is a fraction of actual occurrence. But of course, there is always going to be a loophole. But I think what the carriers are doing at the moment, DPD leading the pack, and lots of other international carriers helping, they're really closing that gap. So that photographs of the door with the parcel on it, all sorts of things. And I think. And then also retailers are paying attention to postcodes and consumer behaviour to kind of stop it before it starts. So there is always going to be potential to be exploited, but in terms of money for the clients that I'm familiar with, it's not a huge issue.
No, I agree on that. It's the delivery is in logistics is never perfect. There's always errors and there theft or whatever. There's always reasons that things are not getting delivered, but the percentage and the amount of money is very limited.
I'd say 1% is pretty good. I mean, just going back to the years when I used to plan commercial stock for retailers, we always used to plan stock loss at 2.5% a season. So
I was actually just going to say, the question seems to be revolving around consumer behaviour, but actually where I have seen bigger problems has been where you've got a driver gone rogue, and you do almost always catch them, but that's the biggest danger, actually.
Sorry, yeah, another question.
Just wondering if the panel has any views on, I think we dismissed drones earlier to some degree, but views on technology and technologies that might actually go to solving some of the issues. So one that I've heard more talk about recently is track and trace. So just tagging every single item in the chain. Is that something that people are starting to think about more, or are there other technologies that you think will start to come into play over the next 5-10 years?
Are you talking about kind of an RFID where you tag a product during manufacture? Okay. It's something that's been talked about for a long time, and it's never really taken off. In the UK, certainly, I can't. I can see the benefit for it, but I'm not quite sure that the additional benefit that RFID gives, again, in most categories, compared to just a barcode, is worth the big investment, because it's a pretty big restructure. You've got people with lots of legacy systems who are struggling anyway to kind of leverage those and use them in a flexible way. So that it's not something that comes up in conversation very often in my world.
We are thinking of introducing RFID especially in business from China to facilitate customs clearance to make it easier. RFID can perfectly work in reducing the cost of scanning, and I think it's really something. We will invest in that, in putting more RFIDs into our own network to reduce scanning costs. And I think also if we should more talk to retailers also to put RFID labels on their products to make it easier for us to handle their products. I think there's a future for RFID.
I think if I can just come at it from slightly other angle, which is the overall rise of programmatic, notably in the advertising space, and the fact that more and more machines are going to be talking to one another. There's the efficiency of going into a market and deploying all your communication resources to drive sell-through as effectively as you can. So whilst we've dwelt a little bit of time on returns, I think there's also going to be an ever sharper point to how communications are served to the consumer, and then that will help push sell-through as well.
Do you see it helping with returns, RFID? I mean, the reason I ask is because one of the issues that I've come across is that people don't want, when the consumer has the product, they don't want to be able to be tagged, and so clearly that means that stops it being on a return.
Yes, I have to be honest, I'm not super familiar with the tech, but that seems to me to get into this area of somebody feeling that there's almost an eye in the sky that knows exactly where they are. And going back to the sustainability point that you touched on there has to be probably some sort of rebalancing of things, be it consumer-led or arguably the industry nudging consumers into a different space, which is you can't keep going at the rate that you're going at. A, congestion, B, the planet, so on and so forth. There needs to be a reassessment in consumers' eyes, perhaps, of what the deal is.
And I think but that's a different topic from where we are all going, where companies like NetEven are making a lot of integration with a lot of different sales channels to allow brands to sell their products for a lot of places. The opposites towards the supply chain will also happen. So if you have indeed multiple warehouses set up, there will be advanced algorithms to indicate where can we ship the product from for the most effective time. So offering this great consumer experience, but also at a lower cost. I also think that's also a trend we are seeing is that from a fulfillment point of view, you will also be using or will be seeing more, switch on, switch off fulfillment options, meaning that you can temporarily set up a warehouse fulfillment operation in Spain just for the season, and then switch it off again. Of course, fulfillment by Amazon is there, but it does not fulfill all, in every case, the needs for the brand. So there are some alternatives there to look at, and that's definitely a trend which we will see in, I think within a year from now that these kind of services will pop up.
Any more questions? Okay. Well, is there one? Oh. No. Okay. All right. On that note, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.